All right, thank you. The final item I'm bringing forth this evening is an item related to proposed redistricting plans that specifically address the board work and is prepared to share with you a review of that proposal and take any questions you might have. Mr. Sorensen?
Thank you, Dr. Cashwell. Good afternoon, board members. As Dr. Cashwell said, I will go through and follow up from our September 24th board meeting. And at that meeting, you guys shared your understanding that our community is enduring a unique and challenging time. So because of your understanding for our community, you did give us consensus to discontinue the comprehensive redistricting process, as Dr. Cashwell just stated, and focus on the hot spots. So these are the 3 hot spots that were discussed at the September 24th meeting. And I'm going to walk through each one and go through the proposal and obviously answer questions as you have them. So let's start with holiday. That was one of the first hot spots that we discussed, and the proposal that I can discuss with you all tonight will be to utilize the existing Holiday Elementary School capacity that's created by the addition we're putting on for our preschool program. So the addition will avail approximately 16 rooms to us. By program standards, program rules, we are limited to 18 students in the preschool program per room. I would like to emphasize that our proposal, we would use the rooms in the existing building, not a new building, but the existing building. And we are leaving flexibility so we can provide individualized instruction or other needs that arise to our students as we move forward. We are not anticipating this as a long-term solution, but the proposal does provide immediate capacity relief at some of our Brooklyn schools with the least impact, in our opinion, on families in that area. So we think, considering the time we're in, this is a good proposal to serve our students, create capacity, and not put a lot of burden on our parents. The schools that would receive capacity relief are Dumbarton, Echo Lake, Johnson, Lakeside, and Longin in the Brooklyn district, and I'll talk about this in a second, but Crestview in the Tuckahoe district would also receive some capacity relief. Again, this is not anticipated as a long-term solution. Our future goal, in fact, is to provide preschool classrooms in the students' zone school, eligible students in their zone school. This reduces the amount of transition for our young students, and so based on the CIP and the funding we can get in our CIP moving forward, that is our goal. So this is a map just that shows the students that we're targeting for this redistricting. It's in the green shaded area on that map. So while I'm on this map, I'll talk about Crestview for a second. Trevette is in the area that we're looking at, but Trevette actually, those students actually attend preschool at Crestview. So by moving the Trevette students to the capacity created at Holiday, we will also create some additional capacity at Crestview. The elementary schools that are impacted by this are in the left-hand column: Dumbarton, Echo Lake, Holiday, Johnson, Lakeside, Longin, and then other schools, Crestview being the main one. The amount of preschool rooms that we would free up are listed. For the most part, it's 2 at all those schools, except 1 room we would free up for K-5 instruction at Lakeside and 1 at Crestview. And then we're looking at 212 students. That is based on the 1920 school year, so of course that number will be different when we implement this program, but we're confident it's going to be around that same number when we implement this. So we talked about capacity, and went through most schools would receive 2 rooms, would free up by this move. Lakeside would receive 1, but we estimate capacity based on 22 seats per classroom. So Dumbarton freeing up 2 rooms, that's 44 additional seats. So using projected K-5 enrollment, so that's based on the September 2019 actual enrollment. We projected September 2020. And for Dumbarton, our projection was 98.3% capacity. If we move the preschool students to Holiday, that would free up 44 seats for K-5 instruction. It would drop the capacity from 98.3% to 92.2%. So that same logic for the other schools listed on the screen: Echo Lake, Johnson, Lakeside, and Longin. Again, the projected September 2020 capacity, the seats that we would free up for K-5 instruction by moving the preschool students to Holiday, and then the reduced capacity for each one of those schools. So that's the holiday overview. That's one of the first hotspots that we talked about. So I'd like to go to the second hotspot that we discussed on September 24th, and that's Colonial Trail and River's Edge. So the goal is both of those schools were projected to be at over 100% September 2020. So we wanted to create some capacity at those two schools in particular. The Redistricting Committee did a lot of great work. We all know that. We appreciate all the time they put in. They developed option D4. So at the elementary level, option D4, we believe had a lot of support in the community. The committee put so much work into it and we thought it made sense to pick up where they left off, since that proposal didn't make it to the school board, and utilize the work that they had done moving forward for this proposal. The one exception to that, and I have a map on the next screen, the one exception to that is there's an area just north of Colonial Trail that the committee recommended moving those students. We're recommending not to move those students. So this is the D4 map for elementary school, for the impacted schools. Again, if you see Colonial Trail, the 58 students right there, we are recommending those students stay at Colonial Trail and not move to Twin Hickory. That's the only difference of D4 that's been out there now for several months from the Redistricting Committee. So the impacted schools in this proposal, Colonial Trail, River's Edge, Cackley, Twin Hickory, Shady Grove, Springfield Park, Longin, and Echo Lake. We've listed the K-5 capacity for each one of those schools. Again, it's the projected September 2020 capacity based on the actual September 30, 2019 enrollment. We have the net change in students for each school. Some schools are receiving students from another school and then sending students out to another school just based on the geography that we had to work with, the development, location of the schools. So this chart shows the net change in students. And again, it goes to the proposed projected capacity. So Colonial Trail, for example, the projected capacity for September 2020 was 104.6%. If we move out 103 students, then the proposed projected capacity would fall to 89.7%. And that's how the chart works throughout. So you can see all of these schools are relieving capacity, getting capacity relief, with the exception of Cackley. It's at 70% now. We're proposing to move 155 students into Cackley to go from 70% to 93.6%. Shady Grove would receive 22 students from River's Edge to go from 84.9% to 87.8%. And Echo Lake would be receiving 60 students from Longin to go from 76.9% to 86.5%. So we wanted to be careful going forward. Obviously, the enrollment is different this year than what we expected, so we wanted to make sure we had some consistency in the enrollment that we were using and what our unofficial enrollment is. So even though it's October 8th, we don't have a final September 30th enrollment yet. It's just a very long, technical, tedious process with DOE to finalize our September 30th enrollment. Literally every student has to be reconciled. So we probably won't have the official September 30th enrollment for several more weeks, but we do have an unofficial count. So we use that for reasonableness, and we felt comfortable moving forward with this proposal based on our unofficial enrollment to what we had projected last year. So we've gone through two proposals, one for Holiday and one for Colonial Trail and River's Edge. Echo Lake and Longin are involved in both of those proposals. So we just wanted to put one slide up here to show that Echo Lake, before any proposal presented to the board, is at 76.9% capacity. If we move out 2 preschool rooms to Holiday, that gives them another 44 seats of capacity. And then in the Colonial Trail River's Edge proposal, they would receive 60 students from Longin. That would take them up to 80.8% capacity. Longin starts at 97.8%. Again, 2 classrooms of preschool students would go to Holiday. That would increase their capacity by 44. They would send out students in the Colonial Trail River's Edge proposal, so they would end up with a final projected capacity of 85.9%. So those are the 2 hotspots that dealt with elementary school. I want to talk about Kuyakison. And I do want to make a statement before I go through this. So Since the last board meeting, I have talked about this proposal with Ms. Shea, just to get clarification. And so when we talk about equity, we're really talking about the feeder pattern equity. And I'll go through some slides to show that in just a second, but the conversation also came up earlier in a presentation about the impact of having several schools feed into a high school, for example. So the focus is really on the equity feeder pattern to be more consistent with our other schools. So if you look at this, this chart contains our middle schools, and it shows the middle schools that feed into high schools. So Brooklyn feeds into 3 high schools, Elko 2, Fairfield 2, and as the list lays out. Kuyakison also feeds into 3. You can see that most middle schools only feed into 1 or 2 high schools. So there are some outliers there. Kuyakison would be one of those outliers, that it feeds 3 high schools. And then looking at high schools, this chart reflects Deep Run, for example, is fed by 2 middle schools. Douglas Freeman's fed by 2 middle schools, Glen Allen 2, Mills Godwin 2, Henrico's fed by 4, but Tucker's fed by 5. So 5 middle schools send students to Tucker, which is the highest on this chart, as you can see. So that was part of this proposal. We wanted to get more equitable in those feeder patterns with our schools. So you want to talk about this map. So the gray line is the current boundary. The gray line kind of runs through the middle of that chart. Students living above the gray line currently go to Kuyakison, and students below the gray line currently attend Tuckahoe. The proposal would send students in the blue area to Kuyakison and students in the orange area to Tuckahoe. So this means Mayberry changes from Tuckahoe to Kuyakison. Jackson Davis north of Three Chop, and that's an important note because Three Chop is also the boundary for Freeman and Tucker. So Jackson Davis north of Three Chop changes from Kuyakison to Tuckahoe. Skipwith changes from Kuyakison to Tuckahoe. And the shaded area in the northwest part of the map would change from Kuyakison to Short Pump Middle. And so as far as capacity, we're estimating about 97 students would no longer attend Kuyakison, so that would change their capacity from 84.3 to 77.1. And again, the goal of this is not capacity, but I did want to share this. Tuckahoe would receive 87 of those students and go from 80.7% to 87.2. And Short Pump, that little corner up in the northwest piece, would receive 10 of those students and go from 93.4 to 94.2. So those are the proposals, and again, obviously, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Also, an important piece of this, so our families have time to plan for the next school year, is to talk about a potential timeline. So the redistricting would go into effect September 2021. So again, we need to work on a program to give our students and our families time to plan. So obviously, today is October 8th for the proposal. Just wanted to start the conversation that maybe we would start meetings to allow public comment to board members in early November 2020. We have one board meeting in November. December school board meeting, we also have one meeting in December, could be for public comment, and then a target date of January 29th, 2021 for board approval. But again, I would love to see board input on this proposed timeline.
Thank you, Ms. Sorensen. Ms. Kinsella.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Sorensen, for working on this presentation and with the board members, and for working with me personally to come up with our creative capacity solution to open holiday. I think it's important that you noted today that it's a short-term solution, but it does free up capacity, and since capacity seems to come and go, as you mentioned, the capital plan, we're never really quite sure. This will be a way that I ensure that I have space in my schools in the Brooklyn district for the students, so as to equity, that we don't continue to be overcrowded. I'm just so pleased that we could come up with this, and although it's ideal for our pre-K programs to be in their schools, in their zone schools, it's not feasible at this time, but I think it's a goal we're working toward. Just thank you so much. And as to the other redistricting options associated with D4, that are going to move some students from Long and into Echo Lake. I've received quite a bit of advocacy over time and even in the past 2 weeks supporting that move. And it's a consistent, I believe, isn't their feeder pattern consistent with Hungry Creek and Glen Allen High School?
Yes, ma'am.
Also there? And then the other move, Ms. Ogburn needs it, so I'm fine with it. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Ogburn.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sorensen, if you could go back to the Colonial Trail map, I'd appreciate it, so we can talk about that. That'd be great. The interesting thing about this and what makes it so hard to know, to be able to fix some of the issues that are in the northwest quarter of the county is if you look at the River's Edge school zone, it is very long, very narrow. It's divided by Interstate 290. And so it's very difficult to move students in that zone. If we were to change the whole way that this area is districted, we might be able to fix some more problems, but certainly don't want to do that. And so I really appreciated the committee coming up with a creative way to be able to handle the redistricting in that area to get some relief for Colonial Trail and for River's Edge. The thing about River's Edge is, and there are communities in there that know what I'm about to say probably, but the whole Sadler Road corridor, for example, would have to move out of River's Edge in order to really solve this problem. But we're not going to ask those families to do that. And where would they go? I mean, and that's the basic problem. So this plan that the committee came up with still leaves River's Edge over 100% capacity, but I think the community as a whole will be comfortable with that because it moves very few children, but solves the problem at the same time. And I think one of the things we came to consensus on is that we wanted to try to solve our capacity and other issues, but affect as few families as possible. And so the committee actually did that. The other thing that is solved by this solution that the committee came up with is that in the rezoning of Colonial Trail, the community of Twin Hickory has been split for a number of years between two elementary schools, between Twin Hickory Elementary and Colonial Trail. And this brings that community back together. They are from what feedback I've gotten, they're very happy about that. And so I think that's a very positive result in this. And again, the committee came up with that. But it also, going with this plan, again, it moved some kids into Cackley because we had room there, so that makes sense. But it also, I think, prevents us from moving too many families, like I said before. And I want to do that because somewhere down the road, I know, and I think we're all aware that as the population grows, there has been discussion about there's going to be another elementary school somewhere out in the western part of the county. So I don't want to move too many families now because we would just have to move them again. So I feel like this is something we can do. We can give some relief to the two schools that are the most crowded, and then hopefully hold tight until as development happens, which it is going to happen. We can, be ready for when there's another school at some point in time. Just trying really hard to prevent too many moves for our families. But anyway, I agree with you, Mrs. Sorensen. I think the committee did a great job. They worked very collaboratively to get this solution and figure out how to get this accomplished. I did want to speak to the feeder pattern issue at Tucker. It has long been a concern of mine. When you look at that list and you see that Tucker has 5 middle schools, that means some of the middle schools obviously are only sending a few students. And that's really hard. That transition between middle school to high school is so hard for students. And when you don't go with many of your peers, it leaves you feeling a little left out. That adjustment is even harder. But it's also that loyalty that is developed at the middle school. I've heard Mrs. Shea talk about this a number of times, and she's so right. When you go to some of our schools, our middle schools, they're wearing the spirit wear of their high school that they're going to. They are looking forward to it. And, you know, Tucker really doesn't have a lot of that. And then when you add on top of it 3 specialty centers, so you've got people coming from all over the county. Obviously, it's a very blended and diverse school, which is wonderful. But I think it would help Tucker to have a solid base of loyalty. And so I hope that we will be looking at that, whether ultimately it's decided to do that now or in the future. I think it's a great conversation to have. I think it's a good place to start. This affects a lot of families, and I'm sure there will be a lot of input into this idea. But with that, I will throw it over to Mrs. Shea to talk more on that topic.
Thank you, Ms. Ogburn. Ms. Shea.
Yeah, Ms. Ogburn, I just actually have one question for you on your River's Edge piece before I try to decipher all the mini notes I scribbled for the other piece. So you mentioned that River's Edge is still going to be over capacity at 105%. Do you anticipate that when that gets resolved, whether it be when a new elementary school is built or during the comprehensive phase of this, do you anticipate that the moves making for this solution would likely not be the same families move twice, especially if it's next year in a comprehensive phase of this?
Exactly, and I think that's, and I think Chris spoke to this a little bit, that the moves that are done by the committee now, that in the future, if we were to shrink this district, the redistricting for River's Edge, we were to change it, that would prevent those families from having to move again. Yes, you are correct. That's my understanding.
Thank you, Ms. Ogburn. All right, I'm going to try to decipher the notes I furiously scribbled while Mr. Sorensen was presenting. So, yeah, a little bit of patience with me. So, Mr. Sorensen, I thank you for your work on this. I really thank you for reaching out to me this week to have some clarifying points about what exactly kind of we were talking about. I know 2 weeks ago I was kind of microscopically concentrating on my district and missed communicating kind of the macroscopic vision that really has to do with a lot of these matriculation patterns and Tucker. Tucker is in Ms. Ogburn's district, but we all work together to help each other's schools and have the best for all of our students in the county. So this plan you proposed here, it checks a lot of boxes for me. It really permits strong matriculation patterns, which is a primary lens that I was looking through the plans from last spring in, and I just think are so essential because we know that strong communities build strong schools. And a note from Dr. Farrell's presentation earlier with graduation rates, he mentioned that students are more successful who feel like they are a part of something more than just their academic classes. And so between that and what Ms. Ogburn was talking about with Tucker, not really having a middle school that it's kind of its primary feeder, and then Kuyakison also breaking 3 ways, I think we can do better for our students, and I think we can build stronger communities and stronger schools there. When I look towards the comprehensive phase of this, it's important to me that we maintain elementary schools as we communities as we matriculate through as much as possible and not introduce splits that don't already exist. So this resolves that 3-way split at Kuyakison Middle School. It also reduces the Tucker feeder to only be feeding from 4 schools instead of 5, but also more so it gives it a majority base. Like at that point, a majority of the Tucker students would be coming from Tuckahoe Middle School. And while you pointed out in your slide that Henrico High School feeds from 4, I believe 75% of their students come from Wilder Middle School. So while it is still 4, they have a base. They have that middle school that, as Ms. Ogburn was saying, really, gets excited about going to the high school because it's a majority. And I think this is also an important conversation in context of the September 10th presentation around Tucker's relaunch in 2021. And not only is it a new school, they're having the high school redesign with new curriculum and re-envisioned high school. And so to give them that community, that majority base to pull from, to really just relaunch them in the best direction possible, I think is really important. It also just adds balance to my district as a whole. I want to note that this is actually very similar to a plan that was suggested to me by the Mayberry community last spring, as well as it addresses some unresolved concerns that committee members shared with me in our debrief after the process paused in the spring. I think there are a handful of benefits to doing this in the first phase as opposed to during the comprehensive phase, some of which include, I think we may be able to consider a broader grandfather policy for this micro move than we would be able to in a macro comprehensive. And again, it gives a stronger community for the Tucker relaunch. So I would like, however, I understand that this is a really disruptive time for our families in general. And I'm sensitive to that, and I'm listening to my constituents. So what I would like to do is bring this forth to the town hall or whatever public official input mechanism we have at the beginning of November. And I really am going to be leaning on the input from these impacted communities here, whether they feel like it's less disruptive to get it done and be done with it, or if they would really like to, during this, to pause a little bit and kind of move this in with, more of the comprehensive phased approach. So I would really love if that town hall or that input could happen early November, so it's before our November 12th board meeting, so that we can make any adjustments to this proposals, or I can have a better idea on the timeline that my constituents would like to see for this by that November meeting. Another benefit to waiting for the comprehensive phase of this is I spent some time with some of our middle school specialty center people this week, and I think the timeline to make any programmatic changes for next fall, with everything else going on, I don't think that's good timing there, but if we waited to loop this into a comprehensive, perhaps we could have a larger conversation about, some of the programmatic details there as well. So I would love, in terms of the public, we always are here to hear from you. I would love if we could kind of get through October in terms of really focusing on Q2 and the high volume of feedback and correspondence we get. I want to be able to focus on Q2 there, and I would love to be able to then, truly focus in on their input on this redistricting after 10/22. So we're always open for input, but yes. All right, I think that's all my notes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shea. Thank you so much, Mr. Sorensen. Dr. Keisler.